So let me pick up on what you wrote recently in, where you talked about some hits, several misses, where a very important point that you made was that it's not about framing new laws and writing new rules. That doesn't lead to good corporate governance. We just need better regulation. Could I ask you to perhaps be a little bit more specific and say, could you share some illustrations or examples of where this regulation can be better rather than more?
I think in the securities market space, what we have seen is a practice called give me a problem and I will give you a regulation, without looking at whether existing regulations address that particular problem. See, there are three elements that exist side to side in securities market. One is surveillance. You figure out what's going wrong, who is the mischief maker. The second is enforcement, after you find out what is happening. And preceding enforcement is investigation. So you get information, you investigate, you believe you have enough material to throw the book at the offender, and then you go in for enforcement. It doesn't mean that every time something goes wrong, you write a new regulation. I'll give you one example. After Satyam blew up, early 2009, there were lots of persons, including in corporate India, who said we need new regulations to address this. Forgetting that existing regulations addressed it. The gentleman just took liberties with the regulations and with law. Got caught, of course, on his own admission, he got caught. And then yesterday only I came to know that the process is still on to finally bring him to justice. And ours is a very tortuous judicial process. But the point is that do we need new regulations in that context? We don't need new regulations in that context. There are several. Let's say there is a problem with IPOs. What do? You promptly revisit all the regulations regarding IPOs, tweak a little bit here. Maybe the change is not substantive, but then what you are letting loose is regulation. And sometimes you don't need regulation. I'll give you two examples. One, the settlement system, which is in SEBI now. The settlement system, which was introduced in my time, because we wanted to clear the large number of minor cases so that the available bandwidth can be used for the systemically important. But there was no regulatory backing for that. There was no regulation written. All that came much later. He introduced that. It was challenged. It survived the challenge. Another example is that in what was famously called IPO scam, there are a number of persons got allotments in different names at the same address, etc. All of that happened, I think, in the early 2000s. It came to light, the investigation came to light when I was there. So the final findings by a colleague of mine. And we decided that if these persons had unjustly enriched themselves, which is what they had done, we needed to get that money back. Now, there was no provision in regulation for disgorgement. So we passed orders of disgorgement and got them to cough up the money. It was challenged and the court said, we are not interfering with this. The only thing is that better to put it under a system, under a regulation. So the point I'm making is this: if you want to do good, if you want to be effective, you don't have to wait to write regulation.
So what is behind this reaction? So this is very reactive. Something happens, I frame a new regulation, and I believe I've taken care of. I have reacted to what has happened without taking into account or context the bigger picture. So what is causing this reaction from the regulator in the first place? And what should the dialogue move to?
One of our problems has been, and it continues even as we speak, is that we don't look at issues in a systemic fashion. We look at them in a transactional fashion.
Right.
And when we do that, then we have a situation where You address the problem because of a certain episode. And you go to the extent of writing regulation, keeping that episode in mind. And if there's a slight variation on the same theme, the theme is the same, it's a variation, your regulation is inadequate. Why? Because you got fixated on the specifics of that particular problem. If we don't move away from that, if we don't look at what is systemic and fix it, you will have more issues, more problems, and you will be responding, reacting in a transactional fashion. We need to move to the system. That's important.